Now that we understand what Ruby on Rails is, let's talk about why you would want to use Ruby on Rails as a web application framework. The best thing about Ruby on Rails is the Ruby programming language. Ruby is just a real pleasure of a language to work with. It's object-oriented, it's easily readable, it has an unsurprising syntax and behavior. It's just a great language to build a web application framework with. Rails is also designed with two guiding principles that help to make it powerful and effective. The first of those is dry code. Now, I'm always going to pronounce that as dry, but it's actually three letters, DRY, which stand for don't repeat yourself. And it's a fundamental principle of software design that says that every piece of information should be expressed in just one place. And it makes sense that the easiest code to maintain is going to be dry code, because duplication can lead to inconsistency, can make our code unclear, and make it harder to maintain and update. So we're going to end up with concise, consistent code that's easy to maintain if we follow this dry principle. And Rails was built using that principle, and it's going to encourage us through the way it's structured to follow that as well. So just keep that in mind as the mantra of working in Rails is your code dry? We want to encourage that habit in ourselves. The second important principle is that of convention over configuration. Rails is built using sensible defaults, and those defaults are what are there unless we override them. So we only specify the unconventional aspects, the things that are different for us. And that's going to speed up our development, right? Because most of the time, we can sort of ride on those defaults to get most of the way there and only write code for the things that are different. And that gives us less code to maintain as well. The other thing about the convention and sensible defaults of Rails is that it's going to follow best practices of web application development. So we're going to have these best practices built in. They're going to be right there ready for us to take advantage of, which is great. It's going to also help our code be better and our end product be better. Now, the one thing you need to be aware of, though, is that it is opinionated about what those best practices are. 99% of the time, it's not a controversial thing. Everyone agrees on what the best practices are. But there are some rare cases where there might be two competing things for what's the best way to do something. And Rails has taken a stand in most cases and said, this is the way Rails is going to do it. You can still configure it to do it a different way, but by default, the sensible default built in will be what it thinks is there. So just be aware of that. The other great thing about these sensible defaults that are built into the framework is that a lot of time we get extra features for free. Maybe we only need feature A and B right now, but down the road, feature C is there just waiting for us, just built into the framework, and all we have to do is start using it. And that's great. It pays a lot of dividends down the road as we continue to grow and expand our web applications with new features. So who should use Ruby on Rails? Well, I'd say just about anyone can use Ruby on Rails, but the people who are going to get the most benefit out of it are going to be developers who have some previous web experience so that they already understand a lot of the way that the web works, and maybe they've been building sites already that interact with databases, and they're tired of creating and recreating site functionality from scratch. They're going to derive a big benefit out of switching to work with a framework instead of writing everything from scratch all the time. And it's also for people who are concerned about best practices, web standards, and web security. Rails is going to help us with all of those things. And last of all, it's for developers who are not afraid of the command line. With Rails, there's going to be quite a bit of working from the command line, more so than if you've, say, been working in PHP. So you have to be ready to embrace that as you dive into Ruby on Rails. Now, a lot of people wonder what the prerequisites are to learning Ruby on Rails, to diving into this framework. Well, I would say that the first thing is you want to make sure that you have the web basics down already, that you understand the way browsers work and web servers work and pages. You don't need all the intricacies or anything, but just have a fundamental understanding of how the web and web pages work. You also need to understand HTML. It's the fundamental language of the web, and everything we do in Ruby on Rails is going to output HTML. So you want to make sure you understand HTML. It's essential. I think it's also good for you to have a good understanding of SQL. Now, you don't need to be an expert, but you need to have some essential SQL under your belt. Even though Ruby on Rails is going to write a lot of the SQL for you, the concepts are still there. And it's important to have an understanding of what it means to join two tables together using a foreign key. So SQL will help you a lot. Now, if you don't have that already, don't worry. We'll cover some of those basics as we go along. I would also recommend that you learn CSS and JavaScript. Now, that's not essential. You can certainly do Ruby on Rails without having either one of those, but those are really going to enhance the experience and make it a lot better for you. So sooner rather than later, go ahead and take the time to learn some basic CSS and JavaScript. But the biggest prerequisite is that you should learn Ruby. Now, you don't need to learn it right from the start. You can certainly dip your toe in the water by taking this Ruby on Rails essential training and then go back and brush up on your Ruby skills later on. But it's sort of like how you can have a nice visit to another country without actually speaking the language fluently. But if you're going to live there, to work there, to dive deeper into the culture, then you have to take the time to really learn the language of the culture. And that's the same way here. We can dip our toe in the water with Ruby on Rails, and we can bumble our way through it and get around just fine, have a perfectly nice visit. But if we really want to use Ruby on Rails, then you're going to have to learn Ruby because it's the fundamental building block that it's based on.